the document. All right, the order is going to be midterms, the citizenship K, and then populism. My word is screwing up. Okay. All right. Midterms adapted solve novo, searching no offense on this flow. The criticism, except that there's no explanation for government telling me they can't get any turn offense off this. There's no conditionality argument in the choice using they can make a new one in the one era. The populism dissent. The dissent outweighs the turns cases causes global populist backlash, restricts the liberal international order. Evidence says that causes backsliding on international norms related to loss of war, climate change, security, and a host of other threats. It turns case because it emboldens racists to target migrants in the United States, which intensifies exogenic stress. Legal alone turns direct judicial incorporation breaks the credibility of any U.S. commitment to ILAW. In 5 non-self-execution French treaties on automatically imposing domestic legal obligations to the political branch to determine the manner in which to implement them. It allows the judiciary to protect the constitutional structure without having to block action by political branches. Ensures separated powers. Practical economic and political points use a constitutionally illegitimate method which throw America's participation in the world system into doubt. Not only would constitutional questions undermine the validity of the current agreement, they would also raise problems for the Americans' ability to engage in more international cooperation, undermine efforts to craft international solutions, international solutions to economic security, the environment, and the humorous link uniqueness arguments. Courts in the cases that the evidence cites that they're citing did not directly incorporate CIL's binding, and to any extent they did, they roll it back as a political dynamic began to favor populism to prevent the dissent. This is positive 17. Not much evidence for any claims that the courts enforced ILAW. These were marginal doctrines of little real-world significance. Courts pushed back, but only a little based on constitutional statutory law. Not ILAW. The Supreme Court's foreign law opinions offended Americans. Congress, state legislators objected to the strongest terms of court. For the time being, seems to take heed loss and enthusiasm, ignoring the arguments regarding ILAW. But there's a lesson. Trump repudiated human rights treaties. It's hard to imagine that he will support them. The anti-global sentiment is as strong as ever. Courts to fight these fundamental effects of political psychology at their peril. Now, the populism threat to institutions is currently waning, but political dynamics haven't changed. They're merely waning, which means that the plan's perceived attack triggers resurgence. Goldman in 18, Britain, Le Pen, Trump seemed part of the same storm. Popular fury was starting to tear down international agreements. A year later, its ideas of populism have largely subsided. Le Pen vanquished by a champion of globalization. The British Brexit changed little of substance, and Trump's anti-globalist thunder has produced minimal alteration to the global order. Now that the Warrior Cabinet is empty, the same source of anger that built the populist wave are still operative, even the political tenure has at least for the moment, my arena. The link turn arguments first extend the link arguments to positive evidence. There's populist backlash, of course, to core integration. This was explained this was explained in cross-text, but they understand the core incorporation as kind of a way to circumvent the elected officials. The elected officials they have triggers the perception of elitism, which is what causes backlash. Which is what causes backlash. They have made the argument about the effect of the plan on the international order, which means that it's certainly relevant to European populism. Certainly relevant to spills over to European populism. European populism as well. If their argument is true, now there's no reference to ILAW sufficiently modest to shield the courts. The only way for global institutions to survive is to avoid risking populist backlash. And laid it out. Helfner in 18 surveillance strategies for populism or legal and political tools counter the challenge and unlimited utility are best uncertain. Can you perform the core function? HRL institutions must avoid giving a college chance as excuse to delegitimize authority. In the short-term violations identified by courts do little to stem the rise of populism by Irish institutions to operate within the long-term horizons, waiting for more favorable conditions which support domestic pressure government statutory long-term effects are likely to occur if institutions operate in ways that make them easy to serve for populist backlash, ignoring the danger signs on verified treaty decisions that generate fear of wider backlash to the materialized they'll threaten the ability of IHR institutions to carry out the vitally important tasks. Circumspection is a modest price to pay for the continuing to perform these essential running functions. Another positive evidence says that the U.S. would withdraw from treaties and the courts would the Congress would withdraw from treaties if the courts incorporated them, which turns the entirety of the affirmative. Now, The brandness evidence does not link backlash happens in the short term. The benefits are described as long-term. Brandness in 18. ILO, international institution after populist politicians. Trump begins the greatest onslaught in American history. The source of friction is international norms themselves with the application of ILO, populist building, public solutions to pretend this calculated tax on sovereignty. Backlash against law. Exists the Eastern European argument was answered. Was answered about the positive peace arguments. It links to the affirmative that was cross-sexed. Their second advantage still has the same thing though. Populism is a structural explanation of social relations, which means that we solve the link as much as they do. Even if refusing the plan only avoids one instance of the impact, still valuable, which is what Cuomo says. Cuomo 96, we need not neglect the importance of addressing specific large-scale military conflicts, avoiding the dissent is a prerequisite solving cases. Vulcan 70, Vulcan 70 prevention nuclear confrontation prerequisite for all other peace research and action. Unless such a confrontation can be avoided, there will be no world left in which to build positive peace. The studies of international systems do not choosing support the status quo. Rather, they offer knowledge for those who understand positive peace to utilize and achieving their own purposes. The last argument about the specificity was explained during the link arguments. They've already made the argument that the affirmative triggers the global perception of how ILA is credible and implemented. You can clap.
Don't be too loud while you're talking because Tasia needs to break.
Stop at 510. Left shot.
KJ, have you sent this out?
Yeah, I think so.
I've not gotten it yet.
Okay.
It just now popped up.
All right.
Got it now.
Sweet.
I'll upload it. One hour is up.
So it's T, coercion, or like hostage taking, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the counter plan, and then the populism DA. Just in case you missed it, it's T, the hostage taking advantage, the Convention on the Rights of the Child advantage, the counter plan, populism DA. Good? Okay. Our interpretation that legal immigration includes permanent residence and temporary, that's the Delonte New evidence legal immigration is permanent and temporary. What's controlled legal immigration is permanent admissions, point based on immigration, temporary admissions, gas enforcement restrictions on asylum include the plan, as well as changing definition of qualitative visa limits, Edward 5, governments are implementing restrictive asylum policies and practices in order to deter and prevent asylum seekers from seeking refugee, including restrictive family unification policies. Our interpretation is good. It's key to affirmative flexibility, including temporary in the topic expansive scope to H1B, T visas, and H2As. All the affirmatives that are core of the topic and central debate over legal immigration, and not to mention silence references wouldn't be topical. They overlimit. Truancy case lists might sound scary, but they're functional limits. Stable mechanisms like counterplans, like parole, TPS act as a battering ramming against topic and bloodshot nearly every they've listed, including diversity and most of family migration. F, that would be nearly all temporary Fs, including, in addition to other words like restriction, mean the F has to beat the auctions counterplan. The literature has to advocate, which means our topic devolves into two Fs, like high-skilled workers and investors. That's terrible for the F. And F ground function outweighs neg ground. The F sets the terms of debate. Neg will always be fine literature generics and strategic advantage of the block and conditional X, the battering and making innovation vital for the affirmative. That's category more important than preserve fairness. The breadth outweighs depth. It's key to maximize relevant knowledge about the topic and facilitate informed industry, which is the ultimate impact to education. Not all of us will ever become policymakers, so breadth obviously matters. More counterplans that don't solve education because they're built to maximally comparative solvency, not arguments that are in the literature. The precision arguments flips our way. What seems from a congressional research and service report that Congress literally used to make policy. It's the most precise.
Slow down.
It's the most precise definition that a policymaker uses, but debatability outweighs anyway. It's the only way to have a topic that isn't artificially contrived and creates meaningful balance for the affirmative and negative for the purposes of having a clash. Their ground arguments that they lose are absurd. This was proven in 1SC cross-examination. They retain TPS in every court. Generic-based asylum function results in topicality, and their interpretation doesn't solve it because you'd allow like 100 high-skilled workers, which would also mean their LPRDAs would functionally go away. Reasonability, it is good. It merely reframes how you evaluate the debate. It means sufficient defense for voting affirmative. Anything else creates a moral hazard for going for T, and T is a 1-to-1 time trade-off. So any imbalance should have been correct, meaningfully correct. For arbitrariness and interventions inevitable when evaluating arguments. Having to minimize is more arbitrary. It arbitrarily privileges arguments, nor does the combination of all reasonable charges links the limits. DB, that's proven by our functional limits arguments above. The precedence nonsense because it's a demo debate. A coercion advantage rejects their calculus of right-wing blackmail. Don't vote to help the children, otherwise the racists will get mad. Is the basis of all of their arguments. Air toward lowering the number of conjunction changes allowed. Every card drastically cuts the likelihood of the dimension. Doesn't link to the affirmative's immediate action. There's no other reason to reject asylum plans that Trump does. The plan says should not deny. So obviously there's no other reason to deny those family-based migration people, which means they can't overwhelm any alternative cause. The plan reduces trauma, longevity matters, and we obviously prevent future deportations, which is significant and meaningful for preventing lives. Utilitarianism is bad. A conjunction probably makes everything far less objective than our internal links. Irreparably is blackmail. So the violence done in the scope was marginally made less important. We should obviously prevent that from happening. And we obviously will disprove the likelihood of the DA, the CRC advantage. Yes, incorporation spillover solves. Trump does not circumvent it. He complies with judicial decisions. Their evidence is just speculation. The Twitter ruling didn't have a court order, which the plan would mandate. Obviously, he complied with the past deportation ruling. Judicial incorporation gets modeled and works. The U.S. policies are key. They're representative of the U.S. as the international leader, and the U.S. judiciary has empirically been modeled, and the U.S. compliance independently gets modeled as well. They can't go for either of these case arguments because it would take out the disadvantage because it relies on U.S. precedent spilling over internationally. Yes, the impact of CRC. It's the key to prevent violence to the children. Lots of violence are being done to children in the status quo. Their sons of humanitarian crisis in Myanmar and Syria, etc. The plan to fulfill all those obligations to the counterplan, permutation to the counterplan. It does the same function as the plan to specify the self-execution portion of the counterplan independently links their link arguments because it doesn't capture our link terms. Populace are populace. They aren't smart enough to decide whether a self-executing treaty or non-self-executing treaty was the reason why the court ruled in the way that there are times that distinguishing rely on a quote from that Sam read in Crossing, which is prescriptive about what Posner wants but doesn't connect it to their backlash arguments. The counterplan doesn't solve our advantages either. The courts have a presumption against using self-executing treaties, so if fiat judicial action would not solve, only fiat judicial action could solve. That's proven by a recent gerrymandering case where the court chose to rule nearly. It doesn't solve any of our populism link terms because of the precedent the judiciary sets on international law more broadly, even if the counterplan solves the link terms, the magnitude of the link term that way, which means usually error after presumption. The DA does not turn any case. You is wrong. Incorporation shadows the United States as binding in international law, which brings in credibility. That's all of our 1AC evidence in our link terms. Populism has no impact if the court rules against them every time, which makes their racist actions impossible to carry out. Populism, the unique debate, populism is rising in the status quo. There's no meaningful domestic law checks, and the laws are being written by populists. It's highlighted by China, Russia, and Trump, undermining domestic protections, which is the tweet card that Lauren read. Their good evidence is terrible. It's descriptive of not predictable. Insert. It's hopeful that a bunch of indicators of populism wouldn't happen, but they all actually did. It cites things like no trade wars with China, renegotiating NAFTA, Italian populists, and the Mexican populists, but all of those actually happened in the last 4 months, prove they have no uniqueness for their disadvantage. The link debate, the framing is that all of our impact uniqueness numbers that I explained above also render linked uniqueness irrelevant because there's tons of racist populists are rallying now that the fact there's low-scale opportunities or declining anti-trade sentiments and general racism all mean that their populism will inevitably rise. The reactions, their backlash cuts both ways. The intellect that Lauren made in the tweets makes a lot of sense. The judicial ruling would cut both ways, which means that even if there would be a lot of backlash from the plan. There would also be a lot of liberal turnout from the plan, which would cut into populism. Our link turn is decisive in outweighs their link. It's fiat until Posner doesn't apply. First is incorporating international law into ruling creates liberal rulings which strikes down populists. For example, we can use the GATT strike on anti-trade provisions, IHL to stop discriminatory policy, and IHL to facilitate humanitarian assistance. The list goes on. Second is liberal rulings independently create room for opening public sphere that's key to demoralize populist movements. The branch says the link turn is immediate. Branch are all 18 into regrettable since the incorporation of international and domestic court rulings conservative counter-populism measure. Judicial refrains from preserving international law, the populist trends to the third beginning of courts. International law serves as a sort of interpretation for constitutional provisions to minimize violations of human rights as much as possible. Mark that card at possible.
You can talk, you gotta be quiet.
Cool. The order is the counterplan, the populism dissent, the coercion advantage. Cool. Is anybody not ready? The counterpoint solves all of the F. None of their evidence is specific enough to the courts to rise to the level of solvency F. This flips the debate. Means we solve all their framing arguments. It's just a question of a marginal solvency F versus the dissent. The 2AR will cite two pieces of evidence as solvency F as the counterpoint. First is the Beyer piece of evidence. They are right that Beyer might be rhetorically sound like the court's matter, but misses the crucial distinction. The Beyer article is written from the position as if the CRC hasn't been already ratified, which obviously doesn't assume the word of the counterpoint. Here's a quote: binding the U.S. even in the absence of ratification. This proves the act doesn't assume a world where we fiat ratification and implementation. Even if that's not enough, their Davidson evidence sets up a sufficient solvency level for the counterpoint that we shouldn't need to beat the Beyer evidence anyways. It says, quote, it literally starts off with, let's ratify the CRC, proves the counterpoint is sufficient to solve the international advantage, which is all that matters for these two cards. The other advantage doesn't matter. The case conceded that the Congress is better at enforcing because they can use funding cutoffs, which are empirically better able to enforce. There, let Lauren bring up the argument she made in cross-text about Congress not being willing to do it because that explicitly wasn't made in the 2AR, and all of their evidence on the coercion advantage is about just ending child separation, which the counterpoint would obviously do. Perm do the counterpoint is new, and new is bad because that caused sandbagging and changes block strategy, which is all they could. Also, it's obviously severance because there's a different actor. Obviously, the counterpoint is the courts, and the AF is the courts, and the counterpoint is Congress. This means that is severance. That's a voting issue because it allows the AF to cut and run from negative ground, which means negative engagement impossible. Their next argument is self-execution. Execution won't happen, and means that they won't link. No, they've conceded that Congress is empirically enough, and all we need to win enforcement. They have no reason why courts alone are the only way to solve it. Only reason why courts are one way to solve it. Also, this proves their linked distinction between the two dissents, which will mostly be explained on the other flow, because only the courts link, because they're the ones seen. Also, they concede a probability framing argument that you should frame the links in net benefit argument through probability. Even if the counterpoint might link it, definitely links less than a plan, and there's only a risk that the AF links more, which causes extinction, while the counterpoint solves the entirety of case. They say counterpoint can solve. This is mostly answered above. All the analysis was done in the overview. None of their cards are specific enough to judicial action. Populism dissent. Populism outweighs. It leads to populist waves that collapse the literal order, causing massive wars that cause extinction. Turns case, two reasons. First is that populists inevitably lead to racist policies that inevitably cause racist backlash that causes more structural violence. Second is it turns the I law advantage, causes different voices in international law. New evidence indicates that when the courts rule on a treaty that hasn't been ratified by Congress, it means that there's different voices on law that isn't empirically viewed as effective internationally. Means the U.S. can't promote it abroad. Also, they've conceded these analytics that indicates the U.S. will pull out the treaty in backlash in response to the court making a random ruling, which obviously overcomes. They say they bring up credibility. No, this will be all answered on the link debate, which they are woefully behind on. The populism up now good debate. Tasia cites little empirics and two warrants, and there's a crucial distinction I'll make below. There's three specific arguments about why they are wrong. First is Le Pen lost, proves populism is declining the status quo. Second is Brexit has slowed down, is not moving forward, and there's doubts occurring in Britain. Third is that Trump has largely been rhetorical, has been able to create many cracks in the liberal world. This all matters because all of those nations are much, much more important than Italy or Mexico. Yes, Italy or Mexico might have shown small resistance as populism. They don't matter as much for our impact because obviously France, the UK, and the US are much, much more important countries in relation to the link debate, which proves that the link outweighs the link turn. Next is the link debate. You need to have link defense to win a link turn. Obviously, if we win any marginal risk of link defense, you should go vote for the link turn because we're controlling the countries that are important for the link. There are two links in the positive and have evidence that they don't have a great response to. First is unelected officials. The court is an unelected officials. They're perceived differently, viewed as elitism because they rule without make the populist votes perceiving is not matter. That empirically causes backlash, which means that it would cause populist waste. Second is they can see the Heffler specifically that when the court rules and incorporates international law from a treaty that has not been ratified, that leads to an increase in backlash because the courts are seen as going rogue and not following the elected officials' wishes. All these outweigh the link term because all of our links are much more important for the countries that matter. Even if the athletes to small liberal rulings in the U.S., it doesn't matter because the courts can serve because other countries outweigh. No link term. First, the court is conservative. The plan is only one instance. They have no evidence to indicate their plan specifically leads to other rulings. Make them identify specific rulings before you really win on link term. Second is it concedes the link. It says backlash happens in states with populist leaders, i.e. the evidence the countries identifying the English debate, which means the only countries without populist backlash will be the countries that don't matter. Obviously, there's only a risk of offense on this flow case. The reason I'm not going here is because the counterpoint solves all their ethical blackmail arguments. Obviously, if we win the counterpoint solves, it means that there's no blackmail, and they're the ones causing blackmail because they're asking you to ignore the extinction of the human race.
Who do I take this from? Oh, I was like, person with you. I realize that they're dogs and not cats, but that's even cute. Okay. I like the
We're going to do coercion. Very quickly to the CRC advantage. Counterplan. Populism. I know I'm making you get your CRC pulled back. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's get moving. Okay. The ethics debate flows definitively off and shapes how you view any potential solvency deficits. Child kidnapping is a side constraint. It's incredibly damaging and untenably humane that so many dropped the empathy-building argument. Consequentialist objectivity ruins your empathy by normalizing the separation of children from their parents. An AF ballot reinforces that brown children are people too, and comparing body counts is impossible. That's Lynn. Now they've dropped our indent of their internal link chain, which reduces the probability of the dissent independent of everything else in this round. Their internal link chain about populists overthrowing the international order is questionable at best and less likely when you consider how it relies on a chain of events that gets less likely as it grows due to the conjunctive and nature of multiplicative probabilities. This advantage, in comparison, clearly solves at least some non-zero amount of child trauma. Drop defense on the dissent is a major no-no. CRC advantage. This is a debate about the internal link to international law, which I'll explain on the dissent. Just letting y'all know. Counterplan. The counterplan links to the net benefit, which is a yes-no question and an auto-ash ballot by flipping presumption. There are two different reasons why the counterplan links in together. They make a pretty damning double bind. Either one, people in Eastern Europe are following the courts super closely, and because family separation violates CRC, it would necessarily have to be struck down in the courts under the counterplan. So they would strongly object to the courts deciding that family separation is forbidden under the CRC. Or two, the public doesn't care about which branch does this thing and is instead generally dissatisfied with the failure of representation, which is what the cards are actually talking about. Remember, these are their link arguments. Don't let their squirrely little distinctions fool you into abandoning your common sense about how popular political movements function. Their card says the courts shouldn't do the thing, which is not an argument about an actual link. Crossix was really embarrassing on this question. Now, the counterplan does not solve the affirmative. Non-self-execution is part of a ratification, and that says it's only judicially enforceable through additional legislation that they do not fiat, which means that the counterplan won't be enforced in the U.S., which gets solvency to both advantages. They have not fiated an enforcement mechanism for the treaty. They have fiated that a self-execution clause be included in the treaty. However, they have failed to account for judicial precedent, which is crucial to determining how the counterplan actually plays out. Precedent in this case is very clear. Even if a treaty explicitly states that it's self-executing, like the counterplan text says, the courts will still presume that it's a non-self-executing treaty and refuse to hear the cases, which means that they'll never rule family separation illegal. Now, Sam lied to me in Crossix about an enforcement plank, which justifies me bringing it up now because it's his fault we got here, and don't penalize Tasia for trusting them. There is nothing in the counterplan text about the legislature enforcing things against the president. The self-executing argument was explained above to be explicitly about what the courts can and cannot rule on, and the word implement just means that the legislature has to pass the thing, has to implement the thing in the counterplan text, not actually enforcement, which makes sense because the executive is the enforcement branch. The argument about funding cutoffs is nonsense anyway. It relies on this Republican Congress to take very strong action against the president in an attempt at enforcement when it's not fiated, when in reality they'll probably do something not severe enough to actually lead to enforcement. Now, the CRC advantage relies on the signal sent by strong enforcement, which the AF solves through customary norms, and the ethics advantage relies on families actually being reunited. This counterplan is a disaster. Populism. If you vote neg on the dissent, you're saying that children should continue to be psychologically tormented so we don't piss off the populace. That's blatantly unethical and divorced from everything else. You need to prioritize the most ethical option because Sam said literally 2 words on the ethics debate on the case flow. This dissent is laughably non-unique. Populism is high now and is being reinforced by populist lawmakers. Brandis is a devastatingly good card, and empirics are way off. Populist sentiments are spreading and polarization is increasing for reasons other than whether or not the U.S. incorporated certain treaties that have already been around for a while anyway. The good mid-evidence is still terrible and it's still not predictive. It makes a bunch of predictions about populist things that wouldn't happen but then did happen, which proves that the plan is obviously not key. Trump did start a trade war with China and is ruining NAFTA, and the Italian populists did win the election, which you know if you went to my afterlab, and the Brexit deal is a total mess. Literally every prediction in this card turned out wrong, which should change how you view any of their evidence evidence and proves that their argument about big small countries is bullshit. Also, Italy is a big deal. I don't know what they're talking about. The link presumes a level of international focus on U.S. judicial minutia that simply is not realistic. To normal people and nation-level activists, like what their cards are talking about, whether a treaty was incorporated at the court or legislature level in the U.S. doesn't matter. And their card is about local populism in Eastern Europe. This answers both their links because both their links are essentially collapsed down into people who are mad about appointed judges doing things. Even if they have a super vague card about the link, it's fundamentally illogical, so it's inhuman and deeply immoral to prioritize it over ending child trauma. Now, the magnitude of the link turn outweighs even if you give them 100% of the link. Either the link is small and it doesn't spill over, or it does spill over, which means the populists get wrecked in court due to the precedent the AF has set. There's no way out for them here, and the link turn solves the link because we result in a strikedown of any racist policies passed by emboldened populists. Now, the impact argument. They dropped Tasia's argument about how the dissad promotes capitulating to white supremacists, which turns the impact under our ethical framing and is an independent reason to vote down the entire counterclaim dissad package. We have a way to solve the impact anyway through trust, than trusting that the populace won't revolt in the future.
All right, friendos, listen up.
Now I'm going to talk for a little bit about things that you should watch for in this debate and hopefully do in your debates. I'm going to start by talking about Tasia. If you listen to the 1AC, you'll notice that Tasia emphasized key words in the 1AC. This not only makes it easier to flow, but it builds his ethos in the debate. A lot of you all will go like this into your laptop and give an incomprehensible spew of things when you're in the text of evidence. You should not do that. You should emphasize key words. Furthermore, moving on to the cross-examination, you'll notice that he made eye contact during the CX and explained his arguments clearly. And when he was cross-exing B, he kept the cross-ex moving. He asked directed, pointed questions and didn't flounder around. A lot of you don't keep the cross-ex moving with an array of questions, so do that as you go along. One other thing I want to point out is during the cross-ex of the 2NC, when Lauren was cross-exing Sam, Tasia was prepping. One of the things that is very annoying is when you're not using your free prep time in the cross-examination. Tasia didn't get involved in that cross-ex, and there's a reason why. It was because he was prepping. For the 1AR, I want to make 3 comments. The first is that he left a lot of prep time for his partner. He left 5 minutes and 10 seconds. The general rule is you should leave your 2AR at least 2 minutes of prep time. So as the 1AR, don't burn down the prep clock. Second, this is an excellent example of using embedded clash. He did not repeat the arguments that the block said. He made a list of arguments that implicitly answered what they said. For example, on the debate about depth outweighs breadth, he did not say, they say depth outweighs breadth, but I'm going to say breadth outweighs depth. He instead started with breadth outweighs depth, which makes it clear that he is answering that argument, but not identifying it by name. If you are at 1AR and you're trying to get time back against 13 minutes of the block, repeating what they said is not going to get you that time back. All right, talk about B. First of all, one thing that I really liked about this debate is the tech was smooth. The debate kept moving. The 1NC had the speech doc ready to go and had it in the judge's hands and the debater's hands. Tech fails, tech problems, etc. are very annoying for judges. We have debates take 20 or 30 minutes extra time in the modern era because people are not good with their technology. Learn to get good at it. Take pride in the ability to keep the debate moving. If you were a judge, you would not want to sit around and wait for a doc that long. Number 2, the 1NC was clear even on topicality standards. Now there was a pretty good risk this debate was going to come down to T, and I didn't even know until the 2NR's overview that it wasn't going to come down to T. And so if you hadn't had those 1NC standards flowed carefully, you would have been in big trouble. I already mentioned that during the cross-ex of the 2NC, be prepped during that time period, which you should not be involved in these cross-examinations. You should be prepping. Now, for the 1NR, number 1, B kicked things at the top of the block. You will notice that the block only had 2 off-case, well, they had the counterplan, the T violation, and the populism dissent, but they didn't keep all 5 sheets of paper alive. The debate for the negative should narrow down as you go along. I watched a debate at the SDI, and I'm sorry for the kids who were in that debate, that they kept too many sheets of paper alive in the block, and then they didn't cover everything well, and it caused problems for them later on. You should kick down in the block and use a vertical spread versus a horizontal spread. I was a 1AR for almost my entire debate career, and I loved it when the block thought they were going to spread me out horizontally by keeping 5 or 6 things alive, because then I only had to make superficial arguments. However, when the block went in depth, especially on my case, while I was a 1A, I didn't write my case. And furthermore, now I have to get in-depth and nuanced in the 1AR, which is harder than using the general arguments to just keep the debate alive. Trust me, as a 1AR, I did not want the block to use a vertical spread against me. A horizontal spread is easier to cover and easier to deal with than a vertical spread. Furthermore, B made turns case arguments at the top of the debate, which are vital in the debates. Okay. Lauren, during the 1AC cross-ex, she asked to get involved. There are too many times where debaters will have their partner talk over them and make them look foolish. You will notice that during this cross-examination, she asked Tasia, can I take that? Can I get involved? Not, stupid idiot, I'm going to get involved now because you're so dumb. Rather, she said, can I get involved? And did some things. During the 1NC cross-ex, she prepped during the cross-ex of the 1NC. A lot of you will waste this time. You'll notice she did not get involved in that cross-ex at all. There's a reason why she was prepping. 2AC. If you are looking for a model as to how to be super efficient on the case, I could find no better model than the way Lauren was in the 2AC. You'll also notice she read no cards on the case. Unless there is case offense, you should not read new cards in the 2AC, because the 1AC is designed to deal with those things. You need the cards on the off case. You are starting from 0 on the off case. On the case, you're starting from an 8-minute 1AC, so you need time to read those cards. Furthermore, she was super clear on the analytics. I could flow everything. We're going to talk about talking into your computer in a second or two. 2AR. First, persuasive speaking. I know that I am old school, but I like it when someone actually tries to persuade me in the 2AR. You'll notice at the very top of the debate, she was very persuasive about the ethics arguments and how you wouldn't want to sell children down the river and cause them to have toxic stress against themselves in the name of a disad with multiple link chains. That was very good. She also provided a clear framing at the top of the debate, which is something you should do in the 2AR. Okay, Sam. The 2NC cross-ex of the 1AC was planned. It wasn't, did you read all of that card? Where did you mark that card? Did you read this evidence because I wasn't flowing? Etc. He had it planned out, and it was clear what his agenda was. For the 2NC, we had no problems with tech again. We kept things moving. For the 2NC, there was a solvency overview to the counterplan where the solvency was clearly explained for each advantage. You'll notice Sam broke down the 2 advantages and talked about why the counterplan solved each one of them. That's better than just asserting that the counterplan solves all the case and blithering on. Probably the best skill you can learn from this 2NC is how well he did in his analytics off the laptop. I noticed a lot of his analytics were off the laptop, but he didn't read them like they were cards. A lot of people think you can read analytics off your laptop like they are cards. You cannot do that. You have to slow down, get your head out of the computer, and look at the judge. And if you remember back to the 2NC, he did those things and was very easy to follow, even on a largely analytic speech. In the 2NR, he kicked down, and one big thing I want to say is he didn't really go to the case at all, because the counterplan solved the case. I've seen in a lot of debates, people don't use the counterplan for the function it is designed. The counterplan is designed to solve the case. You do not have to go to the case if the counterplan solves the case. So make a choice. If you're going for the counterplan, go for the counterplan solves the case, and then don't go to the case. I know a lot of you are like, but I want to hedge my bet. Maybe if the counterplan doesn't solve the case, I'll keep some defense alive on the case. I guarantee you that Sophie's choice will get you in more trouble in debates than using the counterplan for what it's designed to do, which is to solve the case. So if you go for a counterplan designed to solve both advantages, don't go to the advantages. If you don't go for the counterplan, fine to go for the advantages. But we should give them all another big round of applause. And now you should decide the debate.